Okay, so we are now going to wrap this Ruby demo up. So basically what we're going to do now is we are going to look into views a bit more. We are going to add a new view, and we're going to handle some variables. So let's get started. Okay, trying to be cheery for you all today. All right, so this is where we ended up last time. We created a default view. We created a courses view, courses controller, and added a route for that. And again, this is the specific route we used for it to be super extensible. And the idea behind this would be that we have, a way to add courses, a way to delete them, a way to view them, things of that nature. A standard good web application type of thing. So this is where we were at last time. I mentioned this last video, we can view the available routes. So if you want to see what routes your server can handle, you can just run this on the command line and you will get that from your output. We looked at this already, so we don't need to look at that again. Alrighty, let's handle our course ID. So we don't really need to update the route because we have a catch-all route. But what we need to do is, I lost my window here. Too many windows open. Okay, so we're going to update our controller for our courses page. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to get the course ID from our parameters into a local variable, and we're going to render the index page. And then we're going to update that view with a specific variable. Now, one thing that I think we are going to have to do is actually update our route to grab this particular ID in this fashion. I'm going to play with it as we go just to see if it will work or not. But let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to close out of this, and I'm going to follow along my demo that I know of off screen. But app controllers, courses, controller. All right, so here we have our index page. Let's add a new method for show, show, and I want to get the course from the params. And you know what? I'm going to open up the routing as well while I'm here. Routes. Yeah. So this is not going to work the way that I'm explaining it in the slide. So I'm going to try one thing just on camera to show you. And if it doesn't work, fine, I'll update it and we'll restart it. So I am deviating slightly here. Render index. Okay. So I've added this new call, and I'm getting the course ID, or whatever I'm passing in for the string, by calling the params array :ID. Now the slides have course ID here, and this is a hangover from when I had the simple route. So where was it? It's in here somewhere. I know I was showing you it. Ah, here it is. I skipped over it. So when I had this route get classes : course ID, this is where I would be mapping it down. I am 99% certain this will work, and if it doesn't, I get to look silly on camera and I'm going to leave it in, just so you can see my failings. But I'm going to call this ID because I'm fairly certain that's the default name for a variable. If it's not, again, I'll look silly. So I'm going to save this controller, and I am going to add a update to my view. So I'm going to add live update. Losing the ability to speak. I'm going to update my view. So app views courses index, and I'm going to add in another div here. And I'm going to say %equals at course. Right, and that's what we called it. Yep. So here is this variable. It's being associated with our controller. I can just reference it directly in my template. So left angle bracket %equals variable %close angle bracket. And we should, in theory, have a view with an ID. Okay, so this is just on the main page. So we should still see courses, nothing down here. If we look at the source, we should see an empty div, I believe. Yeah, there we go, nothing in there. Now let's go ahead and add in 658, and oh, it worked, good. I love doing live demos where I'm not fully certain if it will work or not. Here's that 658. And again, I'm not doing any error checking. I could put any garbage in here and it will work, right? So there's that stuff. Let me talk through this very quickly here. If I wanted this variable name to be course ID, I would have to delineate that in my routes. I'm not going to right now, but if you wanted to handle that, you are more than welcome to go back to this style. And I know there's other ways in Ruby to rename them as well. So we have a main page. All right, so let's go ahead and talk views slightly here. So views are just HTML templates, and what that means is that it's going to be Ruby and HTML kind of interwoven. It doesn't have to be. You could just have an HTML page and that's it. You could build up a big framework of HTML pages with a base page, describing your content areas, including all your CSS and JavaScript files, and then each specific parsed out route would say load in the articles, load in the blog, load in the about me, and kind of the internals. Just depends on what you want. But this .erb file just means that it will accept Ruby commands as well. So what do we do here? We have to create a new template file. It's going to be a .html.erb. We need to tell our controller to look at that file, pass in variables as we go, and then profit. And we use dated memes because that is my age era. All right, so what are we going to do here? What we will create is a app views controller name new view.html.erb. All right, and what we're going to do in there is we'll add some HTML, we'll add some Ruby, and then we'll tell our controller to view that. So all we have to do here is, I'm going to close everything out. Well, I'm not going to close that. Let's split this. All right, so I'm going to create this line here. So touch. This is a command to create an empty file, and you could do Rails generate view, I believe, as well. I'm just going to be lazy and do the terminal way. App views. This is going to be courses, and then new view.html.erb. So this creates an empty file. Close this now, because it's taken up space. Edit. App views courses new view. Hey, it's an empty file. Oh my goodness. Now, let's see. We're just going to be getting the course ID in here as well. We'll do a looping type of thing when we talk about models momentarily. But let's just say H1. This is the course page for %equals at course, close %equals, and that's it. Div. It is a fun and exciting course. Tell your friends. Delightful. We have a view, but it's not linked up to anything, right? We need to go back to our course controller and show, instead of rendering the index page, we're just going to render new view, because that's what we called our view. Basically, it's just going to look at the file name, and that's how we link it up. Pretty straightforward. So now when I go back to wherever my browser is, there we go. I'm going to say 658, and let's be proper, CIS658. This is the old page. Now when I run it again, there's my new view. All I had to do was add the template file and tell my controller where to look for it, and that's it. Not that hard, right? And hopefully you can extrapolate how easy it is to add new pages in this format and have it all be linked together with a common variable space, common namespace, things of that nature. So that is views. Again, not that bad. I'm sure there are many like boilerplate templates out there if you want to have a particular style or look and feel or things of that nature as well. All right, last bit that we're going to talk about for Rails this week is the model system. So this is how we represent data internally. Now, I mentioned before that you could use a database, SQLite by default, or others of your choosing. You don't need a database. You could just have it be internal, like internal variables, or read a JSON file, whatever you want. We're going to generate a database for our courses so that we can keep track of everything that we're doing. Now, one caveat here. You are probably going to need to stop your server and reload it. And if there's a smarter way of doing this, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. But every time I would do this demo, and I generated a new model, and I would get errors with Rails, and I'll show you that error so that you can see what's happening. Basically, you just have to restart Rails and have it reload the model. When you're adding data, I don't think it's a problem. It's just the creation of a new model. So you'll see that. All right, so let's go ahead and generate a model for our courses. Now I'm going to split this and just do it live so that you can again see the errors here. But it's going to be Rails generate model courses, and then we're going to tell it what is going to be in this model. Basically, what fields do you want? What data type are they? That kind of thing. Still think in that kind of tabular SQL-like syntax. So bin / Rails generate model. We also called it courses, and title string body text. Title string body text. Difference here, they're both technically strings. It's just how big are they in terms of storage. So let's create that. Courses was recognized as this was the plural thing I mentioned offhand a while back. Models, it likes to be plural or singular in nature. So it creates it as course. We get a model Ruby file. We get a database file. We're going to have to migrate it, which is the error that we're going to see. Some configuration stuff. We're going to mostly ignore this for now, but it's all there. So this is what we should see when I refresh. Yep, good. Migrations are pending. We have a database migration that has to be performed. Basically, we have a new data model, and Rails doesn't know how to handle it. So it tells us the command to run right here. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to stop the server, clear this off, and I'm just copying this command in verbatim. Oops, copying it twice apparently. What I wanted to do is move over my session. So Rails migrate developments. Okay, it's going to tell us, hey, everything was great. Basically, our model has been imported, and now I'm just going to rerun our server. Up, refresh. Life is good. Nothing looks different here, but we now have an active model that our application can take care of or can handle. So we have a model. There's nothing in it yet, but we need to handle it. So what we're going to do is update our controller. So in our index page, or sorry, in our index handler, we're going to get a list of every course from our courses model. And we're going to do that by pulling it into a local variable for this controller called courses. Course.all is our so course is our model name. We might have been smarter to name it something a little, easy to recognize, like MDL course or something like that. But this is going to pull everything into this variable so we can access it locally. And then we're going to update our view to loop through every single entry and spit something out. This is a very common thing when you have data that you're loading out of a model or a database or a file or something like that. Just run a for loop through every entry and list it out. It's what your typical blogs or product pages are going to do. So let's update the controller now. You go off screen. I'm going to go up here. I'm going to leave this pane open because I'm going to need it in a moment. But we need to be in our controller here. So this is still our course controller. And one thing I should mention too, I never showed you this, but if I go, where did my screen go? Go to my home page here. So here's our course page, but we should see right here, there's our puts command for index. So if you wanted to log something specific, for instance. But I'm going to get rid of that because we don't need to see that. Okay, Okay, update our controller. Let's get this variable into at courses equals course dot all. All right. Now we have a variable called courses. We have a variable called course. Again, let's be a little bit smart. So I'm going to update this to course ID later on, just so that we don't have a conflict in mental overload. Obviously, they're different variables, but I don't want too many of you to be confused. This is now course ID. Okay, just making sure this new variable name's handled. So this is course ID and show. Course ID and show. Our index page has a list of all courses, and now let's edit our default view. So app, views, courses, index. All right, so here is our main page that we see here. All right, so that's what we've got going on here. All right, now what I want to do is let's add another div. Divs are great. Come on. There we go. So we have a div. And let's say available courses. So we've got a header block here. Let's get rid of this one. Now, I'm going to create a bullet list, so ULs. This is where we're going to do our loops. So basically, I have a container for all of my bullet points with this UL here, and I'm going to loop through each of my courses and spit out a list element. So the idea, let me show you really quickly. This is an element. So we should all know li by now. I'm going to put a handful of them in. We're going to refresh the page. So here is our new content that we've got here. I want the LIs to be automatically generated for me. So what we've got to do is do a little bit of Ruby. So bracket percent, at courses.each do course. So this is basically the for each syntax for Ruby, if you're wondering. So I've got this controller variable here, which again is just a class variable. For every entry, do something. And this course variable here that you see in these bars is basically going to be the local iterator variable. So I'm going to loop through courses, and the current line of that will be called course. All right, so I'm going to define an li, and close li. So I'm going to define a list element. This will be spit out for every line. I'm going to say percent equals course.title. So what I should get is a list of bullet points for every single course, right? Because .title is one of those fields in my model. And I could have like a .url and have it go to another page, turn this into a link. I could hover over it and have the description pop up in a little, pop-out type of thing if I wanted, whatever I wanted to do. So save that, go back, refresh, and oh my goodness, we're going to see nothing because our model's empty. Oh my goodness. So let's fix that. This is in place. We don't see any errors. Life is good. So two things we could do here. One, you could implement the full CRUD application. So create a new course, edit a course, all of that kind of fun stuff. That would be adding those methods to your controller, adding the views, adding everything you need to handle that update, right? Or we could just do this in the terminal to get some default data in there. So that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to go into my empty pane, run the Rails console, and then define a new course and put that into the model directly. So what's going to happen here is course equals course.new, and I'm going to tell it what's the title parameter, what's the body parameter, save it, and then we're going to have it just be there for us. So let's pop down to this pane, make you a touch larger and wider. So bin/Rails console. So I'm going to get an interactive Ruby environment. So if you played around with Ruby in the last week, you should remember this a little bit. It's the same thing. So course equals course. And this is one of the nice things about the interpreter 2 over Python is that it gives you tool tips, which the first time I used it, I was not expecting. But course.new, title, web architectures, body, This is the description for CIS658. Okay, so I'm creating a new variable in my local terminal. All right, so we have a course object here. I'm going to say course.save. And what it's doing, and you see here, this is just an SQL command, but it's abstracting insertion into a database for me. So I create a new course object and I save it. Easy enough. All right, so if I type in course, here's all the information about this item. And if I did course.all, here's a list of all our entries. Now let's do this. Let's do one more just for demonstration purposes. So let's say course2 equals course.new title. Since I'm teaching this in a few hours, less than a few hours, hour now. Ooh, my voice is going to be shredded for that class again. Description. And I can type body. CIS367. Okay. Course2.save. All right. So now if I do course.all, I've got two courses. How neat. What do I have to do on my actual web page now? Just refresh it. Easy enough. Again, this is in the database. So I've got my code in here and my controller to say grab everything from the database. And in my view, I'm saying loop through every single entry. Now, this would be great if I've got kind of a default like landing page where I show everything. Maybe I restrict it to a particular date range or something of that nature. That'd be tweaking our controller call. So what have we done here? Well, we have created a model, we created a controller, we created a couple of views, and we linked them all together, right? So what I would say is if you're kind of interested, follow along with some of these demos in here. And again, they're all intended to be kind of separate just to focus on each one. But what we're going to talk about next is PHP and then Flask. Bye, everybody.